At exactly 9:17 p.m., the security camera captured a moment that would later feel heavier than time itself. Daniel Carter slowed his steps near the glass exit of a downtown Chicago office building, his reflection faintly shimmering in the polished marble floor beneath him. He turned his head once as though responding to a distant sound, then again slower this time, and finally a third time, longer, more deliberate. There was no panic in his face, no visible distress, only the quiet awareness of someone who sensed that something had shifted in the air around him. Something unseen but undeniable. Then he stepped outside. The door closed behind him with a soft hydraulic hush. The camera continued recording an empty hallway that would soon become evidence. That single moment would be the last verified sighting of Daniel Carter. And before we go deeper into this story, understand something important. Stories like this don't always make headlines. They fade. They get buried. They disappear just like the people in them. If you want more real stories like this, stories that deserve to be told, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Because every subscription helps keep these voices alive and these truths from being forgotten. Daniel was 38 years old, a supply chain manager for Meditech Logistics, a private firm handling sensitive federal medical distribution contracts. He lived in Naperville, a suburb just outside Chicago, with his wife Melissa and their 8-year-old son Tyler. Daniel's life was built on routine and reliability. Every weekday began with the same quiet rhythm. Coffee brewed at 6:15 a.m., the morning news murmuring in the background, Tyler's backpack checked before the school bus arrived. He drove to work by 7:30, returned home by 6:30, and spent evenings helping with homework or fixing small things around the house. He was the father who volunteered for school fundraisers and the neighbor who helped shovel driveways after snowstorms. Melissa often joked that Daniel was predictable in the best way. He never forgot anniversaries, never missed Tyler's baseball games, and never left a task half-finished. His co-workers described him as methodical and precise, a man who thrived on order. In an industry where timing and accountability could mean the difference between life-saving deliveries and devastating shortages, Daniel's attention to detail made him invaluable. He wasn't ambitious in a way that threatened others. He wasn't political. He simply did his job well. 2 weeks before his disappearance, that stability began to crack. A shipment of federally contracted medical equipment, ventilators, surgical kits, and emergency response supplies, went missing in transit. The loss wasn't just financial, it was national. Hospitals were already strained, and the missing inventory triggered immediate scrutiny. Internal audits began within days. Then external compliance officers arrived. Soon after, federal investigators requested documentation. Daniel's name appeared in the system logs tied to the shipment's clearance process. At first it seemed procedural. His access level was consistent with his role. He provided emails, delivery confirmations, and workflow timestamps that aligned with company protocol. But suspicion, once introduced, rarely disappears quietly. Co-workers began whispering. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Daniel found himself answering the same questions repeatedly. At home, Melissa noticed the change before Daniel admitted anything was wrong. He slept less, often waking in the middle of the night to check his phone. He began double-checking door locks and scanning the street before pulling into the driveway. When she asked if something was wrong, he gave vague reassurances. "It's just work," he said. "They're looking into some things." He didn't elaborate. On the day Daniel vanished, nothing outwardly dramatic occurred. He returned home after work, changed into a clean shirt, and told Melissa he needed to meet someone to clear up a misunderstanding. His tone was calm but distant. He kissed Tyler goodnight and promised to bring him a new baseball glove soon. At 8:43 p.m., security cameras recorded Daniel entering a commercial office building in downtown Chicago. The building housed consulting firms and financial offices, neutral ground for private meetings. At 9:02 p.m., footage showed him pacing near the elevator bank, checking his phone repeatedly. At 9:11 p.m., he answered a call. His posture changed. He listened more than he spoke. When the call ended, he stood still for several seconds before moving toward the exit point. 6 minutes later, at 9:17 p.m., he stepped out of the frame forever. Daniel's phone signal ceased shortly afterward. His credit cards were untouched. His car remained parked overnight. The next morning, Melissa reported him missing. The Chicago Police Department launched an investigation that began with urgency but soon encountered the familiar obstacles of missing person cases. No witnesses, no ransom demand, no physical evidence. Weeks passed. Interviews were conducted. Surveillance footage was collected. Then, a digital forensics analyst reviewing nearby private cameras discovered something previously overlooked at 9:19 p.m., 2 minutes after Daniel exited the building. A dark SUV pulled briefly to the curb. The rear door opened. A figure entered. The vehicle drove away. Phone records were re-examined. The 9:11 p.m. call was traced to a senior executive within Daniel's own company, a man who had initially been cleared. Under renewed questioning, the executive admitted that the missing equipment had been diverted through unauthorized channels. Daniel had discovered discrepancies and refused to ignore them. That night's meeting had been framed as a conversation. Daniel believed transparency would protect him. He entered the SUV expecting negotiation, that he never returned. With no body and limited physical evidence, prosecutors declined to file charges. The executive resigned months later. The case stalled. Melissa was left with memories. Tyler grew up with questions. The footage of Daniel's final moments still circulates online, an ordinary man stepping into uncertainty. The cameras recorded everything they could, but they could not save him. Melissa spent the first weeks after Daniel's disappearance caught between disbelief and determination, moving through her days like someone waiting to wake up from a bad dream. She replayed his last voicemail constantly, a simple, calm message saying he might be late and not to wait up. The house felt frozen in time. His shoes remained by the door, untouched. His coffee mug stayed on the counter where he had left it that morning. Tyler kept asking when his dad was coming home, and each time Melissa answered with the same fragile hope she wasn't sure she believed anymore. Soon. The police followed procedure, launching an investigation that seemed urgent at first, but as days passed without leads, the intensity faded. Interviews were conducted, Daniel's phone records were reviewed, and co-workers were questioned, but nothing brought him back into view. Friends and neighbors organized searches, printing flyers and sharing his photo across social media. Local news picked up the story briefly, a suburban father missing after a downtown meeting, but like many stories, it was quickly replaced by newer headlines. Still, Melissa refused to let Daniel become another forgotten case, and she pushed relentlessly for answers even as the world around her began to move on. Behind the scenes, one digital forensics analyst assigned to the case continued reviewing nearby surveillance footage long after others had shifted focus. Frame by frame, hour by hour, he searched for anything overlooked. Days later, he found something, a grainy image from a parking garage 3 blocks from the building where Daniel was last seen. At 9:19 p.m., just 2 minutes after Daniel exited the office complex, a dark SUV entered the underground garage. The timestamp matched perfectly. Unlike the public footage that showed Daniel stepping outside, this camera revealed something new. The SUV remained inside for nearly 3 hours. Another camera deeper within the garage captured a fleeting but unmistakable moment. Daniel stepping out of the vehicle, flanked by 2 men. He was alive. This discovery quietly shifted the investigation's direction, even if it didn't reopen it publicly. Phone records were re-examined, leading back to the 9:11 p.m. call that Daniel had answered moments before leaving the building. The number belonged to Thomas Hale, a senior executive at Meditech Logistics who had already been interviewed and cleared earlier in the case. Under renewed questioning, Hale admitted he had arranged the meeting that night but insisted it was meant to resolve internal discrepancies in a private setting. According to him, Daniel had agreed voluntarily and left afterward on his own. Financial audits soon complicated Hale's version of events. Investigators uncovered unauthorized transactions connected to the missing medical equipment, shipments rerouted through shell companies and third-party vendors. Daniel's access credentials had been used to approve the transfers, but metadata revealed irregularities suggesting remote manipulation rather than direct input. The truth began to surface. Daniel had discovered the fraud. He had flagged inconsistencies in shipment logs and refused to overlook them when asked. That night's meeting had been presented as an opportunity to clear up confusion, perhaps even to protect him from blame. Daniel believed showing up and cooperating would help resolve the situation. Instead, according to later testimony from a subcontractor who agreed to speak confidentially, Daniel was pressured to sign documents accepting responsibility for the missing equipment. When he refused, tensions escalated. He was held overnight, though no official record documented where. The subcontractor claimed Daniel was later transferred elsewhere for what was described as further discussion. From that point forward, the trail ended. No additional footage, no phone signals, no confirmed sightings. Prosecutors faced an impossible challenge. Without a body or confirmed crime scene, there was no concrete evidence to support criminal charges. Hale's legal team moved quickly, framing the encounter as a voluntary meeting that simply ended without resolution. Publicly, nothing changed. Hale remained in his role for several more months before resigning quietly. Meditech settled several federal contracts under review, and internal reforms were announced without acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The investigation into Daniel's disappearance gradually returned to silence, another unresolved case filed away under insufficient evidence. For Melissa and Tyler, time moved differently. Tyler grew older with memories instead of presence, learning to live with absence rather than answers. Melissa continued to speak about Daniel whenever she could, attending community forums and corporate accountability discussions, determined that his story would not vanish as easily as he had. Years passed, but the footage of Daniel's final moments remained. It circulated online and appeared in documentaries and true crime discussions, each replay inviting speculation about what he felt in those last seconds before stepping outside. Some viewers believed he looked afraid. Others thought he appeared resolute. Melissa saw something else entirely: trust. Daniel had believed honesty would protect him. He believed that cooperating and telling the truth would resolve everything. The last recorded image of Daniel Carter does not show a man running from justice. It shows a man walking toward what he thought was fairness and transparency. The cameras captured his departure but not his fate. And sometimes, the absence of what we see tells a deeper story than the images themselves ever could.